My brother does. He's a freelance artist, and does like a lot of does a lot of portraits and stuff for people. But he's very very talented. But he has done Comic Cons, and I remember him saying that one time he did Dublin Comic Con, and like he just had a prime seat for across the way, just with the doors lying wide open, was Kevin Conroy doing his, and like over like the other side of him was Ernie Hudson. So it was like Ernie Hudson, my brother, and then Kevin Conroy across the room.
That's a dream team right there.
Yeah. But I remember him saying that like that was apparently Conroy's opening bit for everything. It was just like he'd come on stage and just do that. And he's just like, it looked like it must have been the greatest feeling in the world because everybody in the room was just going crazy by him saying that. And he was just like, you never get tired of it. Like it's just like walking on and been like the most beloved man in the room for just saying, I am Batman,
Yeah. Mary and I went to see him at MCM London Comic Con in 2018. And he did that whole routine and it was great.
Yeah. It's that's one of the big tragedies. Is like, just never got close to him myself. Yeah. We're always kind of remember in the pre-planning of Mask of the Phantasm was like, we could reach out because we've put on the horn to like Dan Reba and stuff like that. But I'm like, well, he's showing interest. I was like, maybe Kevin Conroy. And then it was just like, as we're getting geared up to begin recording, it was like, guess what? He's not around anymore. So.
Yeah, terrible business, a tragedy. We were robbed.
Yeah.
I didn't do the introduction.
No,
we just went straight into it. So, hi, everybody. Welcome to this episode of Totally Schway, a DC Animated Universe podcast. You might be listening to this and thinking, oh, Mary sounds different.
You go through changes, Luke,
No, but unfortunately, Mary's not able to be with us today. She mentioned in one of our earlier episodes that she was having an operation on her nose, and she's just a bit too under the weather today. So I've roped in hopefully a familiar sounding voice for some of you because you may have heard me appear on his podcast, but I have Niall from Batminute.
Hey, it's always weird now because I was introduced to you as Serum Lake for so long, so saying Luke is still weird to me. But hello, hey, here I am.
I find it weird people calling me by my name in general. But yeah,
you still always have that hurdle too, the big one, particularly it's always weird. Most of our guests on Batman are American, so it's always pleasurable when it's like, oh, it's someone from like the nearby area. But you always have the thing because I always find it weird speaking to old teachers. People like I have a primary school teacher who was like, oh, he's actually the primary school principal, and every time the impulse 30 years later to call him sir all the time, and it's just so odd. But everyone else I'll be like, hey, Bob, that kind of thing. But every time with him it's just like. Trying to say his name is just John, but it's just like, no, can't do it, cannot do it.
Well, hopefully by the end of this, you'll feel comfortable referring to me by my given name.
Yeah, well, we'll see. Fingers crossed.
We'll have an update at the end of the episode. Let's start things off. For people that don't know you, give us your elevator pitch for Batminute podcast.
Batminute is a podcast wherein we have been for the past several years analyzing and breaking down and riffing on each minute of the Batman movies from 1989 onwards. We've finished that 89 through 97 set, the classic Burton Schumacher duologies. And then rather than just trounce on into the Chris Nolan stuff because it's so dense and big and oh my God, we decided to sort of stop and go back in time. So now we're back doing Mask of the Phantasm, which has been a great season, but it's so weird because we're so used to having like 120 episodes a season, and Mask of the Phantasm is 76 minutes long. So it's always a weird pitch to have to say to people like doing, breaking down a film minute by minute. It just sounds like, how are you going to talk about that? You find so much to talk about in every single minute of all these movies. Particularly like all the Burton movies were fascinating, just getting to go into himself as an artist and just the career of Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson and Danny DeVito and all of these people you get to talk about. Some of the weirdest things you find out about, like, we had a whole thing talking about apparently Michelle Pfeiffer was part of a cult for a long time, which made her believe that she could live on nothing but rays of the sun. That was a genuine thing Michelle Pfeiffer was part of in like the early 80s for a while. it's so that's the kind of information you get from from Batman. And we get into all the nooks and crannies. And this season we've had a lot of talk about the Timverse, as it's I don't know, but do you agree with calling it? Some people call it Timverse, Diniverse. I always feels like it's a more of like it was a collaboration, the whole thing. As it feels a bit
absolutely. I agree with you there that, you know, a lot of people go, oh yeah, it's Paul Dini and Bruce Timm's creation, but it's evident to me, just through all of the research I've done, that everybody that contributed to it added something substantial. You know, you'll think about these amazing episodes. Like, let's say for me, my favorite one is Two-Face Part 1. And I just think about the artistry of it, the amazing like framing of the shots and the voice acting, etc., and the writing. You know, Bruce Timm and Paul Dini didn't have much to do with that episode. Bruce Timm polished up some of the storyboards towards the end of the episode, but it was a story by Alan Burnett. It was written by Randy Rogel. Obviously Richard Moll performed as Two-Face. You can go on, but you know, it's not a neat and tidy way of describing it. You know, the Tim, Burnett, Dini, Raider, Altieri, Reba, etc. verse.
I always refer to it as BTAS.
Yeah.
So because it sounds like beaten ass, and BTAS of the BTAS verse. I guess. I commonly use DC Animated Universe, and I know that's become a bit more complex because there are all these different animated universes now. But you know, back in 1992, there weren't. This is the original. Yeah. That's the thing. It's going to go on now, because then you had the DCU was, of course, the DC cinematic. It was DCEU they were calling all the Zack Snyder stuff, right?
That's right.
And then so now you're going to have James Gunn's. What's that going to be called? People are already calling it the Gunverse, so I guess it'll just be the Gunverse by default. You know, it's just like, even if he has nothing to do with the movie, really, it's going to be like it's part of that set. And then when he goes, they'll get somebody else in, and then that'll be a whole other kettle of fish. But see, I know then there was the DCAU. There was that whole run of films where they had like Rainn Wilson as Lex Luthor, and that was all kind of tied together. And that feels like that's a set as well. Yeah. And then they rebooted that. So it's just like, it's getting it is all very, they're all just movies. We're all just, they're all just in the same big stewing pot.
Yeah. That's a good way of looking at it.
Well, we always had sort of difficulty. What's that difficulty? We've had a lot of fun sort of in trying to keep the continuity between the Burton movies and then the Schumacher movies, because they're basically two different universes. But there is like little interconnective tissue as well. So it's just always so weird to be like, Pat Engel, Michael Gough are obviously been like the obvious ones.
Yeah.
But just like, the framing that shot in Batman Forever to look like the person who killed Bruce Wayne's parents is framed exactly the same way as Jack Napier was in '89. And so you're sort of made to be like, this is a sequel to those first two movies. And I was like, this city got a massive revamp over the course of 3 years. It just went, we're getting rid of all the giant, friggin' weird Gothic architecture, and we're leaning in to nothing but neon all the time. You can keep some of these giant heads, though. They're pretty cool. Like, they're like having giant heads throughout the city. But
massive statues of nudie men. We'll keep those. But everything else, demolished.
This is more adding the bodies, I think, is the kind of like, Tim Burton's all about the heads. And it's like Joel Schumacher comes in and it's like, well, I guess some muscular bodies on the go here, too. I think we can... So that's one of the things about you haven't really introduced the pitch of the episode yet, of talking about the influence of Tim Burton on the BTAS show and beyond. But it's just because they do have weird little things where that's all very much like a snake eating its own tail after a while, because you have Burton sort of almost begrudgingly influences BTAS in a lot of ways. BTAS then influences the Joel Schumacher movies.
Yep.
And then at one point, very late on, in some of those later New Batman Adventures episodes, you get sort of jarring references to Joel Schumacher films in the BTAS universe. And it's so just like, this is wrong. Now this is weird that you have like Mr. Freeze hanging out with characters who are blatantly like misbehaving from Batman and Robin, and you have like an opening referencing the beginning of that movie and stuff. It's like, oh man, this is really come full circle. This whole thing is so strange as it goes on.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we get into all that.
Yeah. So I guess the first thing we should start with is obviously, well, actually, I'll go back a little bit further. So I don't know how aware you are of Steven Spielberg's involvement in the whole story as well.
Well, I know that like he did things like lobbied hard for them to be able to get a full orchestra to do, the things like that. Yeah.
So he was one of the most successful directors of the 80s, and Warner Brothers were desperate for him to make some movies for them. And part of the deal was that Warner Brothers would revitalize their animation department, which had been languishing for decades by this point. And the first thing that they created was Tiny Toons.
Mm.
And he wanted it to basically be everyone would have the same resources that were available back in the 40s and 50s. So full art team in-house and orchestral music. And when they finished Tiny Toons, they're like, okay, now what do we do? We've got this huge department with all these employees. We need to do something else.
Yeah.
And around the same time, Batman had come out and been a huge success. And so they decided that they were going to make a Batman show. And it's interesting because when the pitch was, well, when the executives were opening up for pitches, they took pitches from anybody and everybody. Because at the time, Bruce Timm was just, I think he was just a storyboard artist. I mean, I say just a storyboard artist, but he wasn't like a director or a producer at that point. And Eric Radomski was another person who submitted their own pitch. He was a background artist.
Mm.
I'm sure other people must have submitted pitches as well, but Eric Radomski and Bruce Timm were both picked and put to work together and given the roles of producers. Now, apparently they thought that they might just be able to be like, art leads, maybe. They didn't think they'd be in charge of the whole thing, and it made them panic. But once they kind of got everything up and running, there were some mandates from the studio to tie in as much as possible with the Burton films. So that's why the Joker's given the name Jack Napier.
Yeah.
That's why the Penguin looks like a little bit like Danny DeVito's Penguin.
And of course, the famously, we covered that in our coverage of Returns, was that they didn't want any photos of DeVito leaking. They wanted to keep the makeup as secret as possible for as long as possible. And so rather than just giving them reference photos, they had to come in with their sketchbooks and actually sit and draw him as he was getting done up and stuff, which is considering too that they didn't particularly want to have to base their Penguin on Danny DeVito. Must have been a bit frustrating having to be sitting and be polite and go like, oh, God damn it. Though. But then even that's so, because all those things go on as time moves on. Those things also begin to fade away, noticeably, because even by the time of Mask of the Phantasm, obviously you mentioned there they refer to the Joker as Jack Napier in several episodes. That was always a rumor I never had completely clarified. We covered it in '89 that the rumor was that because Jack Nicholson made like all the money in the world from his various wheelings and dealings behind the scenes on the '89 Batman, and one of them we had heard was that because he originated the character of Jack Napier, every time they used the name Jack Napier, he would get a cut of that as well. So therefore, he would be getting like, not only was he getting money from those sequels that he wasn't in, because that was part of his deal, he might have been getting a cut of BTAS as well, because if they refer to him as Jack Napier, therefore that character ties into a Jack Nicholson creation, and therefore he gets that as well. But remember, coming across that and then not being able to find a lot of things to back it up, it was just sort of a rumor mill kind of thing. Yeah. But again, he made so much bank on that film. It would not surprise me if that's like he's still sitting on a pile of Jack Napier money that he hasn't touched since 1989. It's just sitting in the corner of his house somewhere.
Yeah, it's funny actually, because something else I discovered recently is that anytime someone uses his likeness in relation to Batman, he gets paid. Doesn't matter what it is. It could be a poster. It could be, I don't know, in a comic book or something like that. If it looks like Jack Nicholson, to a share of the money. I learned this because of a Greek artist called George Kaltsoudas. He'd done a whole bunch of Batman the Animated Series prints. He had also done a Batman Returns and a Batman 89 print. And he was saying that in his Batman 89 print, it got rejected by Warner Brothers because it looked too much like Jack Nicholson and they didn't want to have to pay him any money.
That'll explain exactly why too, because we covered for our Patreon the Batman '89 comic that came out recently, where they get a lot of blurring, a lot of I don't know if you read the whole run or
I did, yes, the one with Billy D. Williams likeness.
you get Billy D's Two-Face and stuff, and you get this weird. They give him proper Burton eye on the one side. He's got like a Mars Attacks Martians freaking eye on one side. But yeah, noticing throughout that they have a weird thing that they blend a guy who looks a lot like Michael Keaton, but enough that it might not be Michael Keaton. Blend him with the Bruce Timm design. He kind of it's two things in the one go. But they have a whole thing about like there's the Joker's gang, which of course Batman Beyond. But it's strange that at no point do they ever show an image of the Joker. They always just sort of reference it. That was a thing that happened, and this gang, one of them looks like friggin' Prince. He looks like Party Man at one point. They're happy to try to deal with Prince, like one of the estate of Prince, one of the most litigious friggin' foundations of the universe. Is like the land that landed on Morris Day for trying to use his own friggin' name like a couple of years ago. They're happy enough to deal with them, but they didn't try to put in an image of Jack Nicholson's Joker anywhere. Probably for exactly the reason that you're saying. It's like, oh no, we're not giving that guy any more money. Like, god damn. But it's so strange. Like, as it goes on, you can see that they try to drift away from a lot of that stuff. Like, because even by the time of Mask of the Phantasm, notably never referred to as Jack Napier in that movie. And we've been going through the script and the novelization. It's one of my favorite things discovering this season is that because I'm a big horror movie fan. His character before he's the Joker is only ever referred to as the Tall Man, which is a reference to Angus Scrimm's character in Phantasm, the Phantasm series. I was like, oh my god! So that's because I'm a big horror fan. My co-host John doesn't care a crap about any of that. But every time I mention, I'm like, oh, it's amazing, right? So he's like, I don't care. What are you talking about?
Why? It's almost like these writers knew what they were doing.
Yeah. And then they've done things recently because they've had, of course, this The Adventures Continue comics have come out, and they even had an explanation as to why the Penguin looks different and stuff. Where he was fighting the Red Hood and he fell out of a blimp or a helicopter or something, and then he had reconstructive surgery, so he goes from looking like Danny DeVito into looking like a normal-ish man. I guess he managed to get his fingers fixed and stuff, which is and it's, I always remember thinking then they have a whole thing where obviously the Adrienne Barbeau's Catwoman was very much physically, or Selena Kyle at least was very much physically based on Michelle Pfeiffer, and then even the outfits kind of about as close as they were willing to get with it's gray like year one, but it's also a bit like the Michelle Pfeiffer outfit, and they have a whole thing in that continuation comic where she discovers that her hair dye was testing on animals, and so she stops dyeing the hair blonde. She goes into the Darwin Cook pixie cut thing, which is also but now we finally got our Catwoman that we want to do. But I guess at some point they also changed their minds because they're like, we do like that black outfit though, so we're going to kind of make her still look a bit like Michelle Pfeiffer. So it's a whole big mess basically. Of just like, well, we're kind of trying to get away from this thing, but we'll keep that as well.
Yeah. It's really interesting because in Bruce Timm had a book released as part of it's like a Modern Masters series where they interview comic book artists, and they did a whole bunch of them, people like John Byrne and Kevin Nowlan, and there's one with Bruce Timm, and he talks about the Catwoman design where he said that the studio did want them to do an all black costume initially. But he showed them all black costume on all black background, saying, look, this is going to be impossible to see anything. We can't do that. And then there was also some kind of reluctance about Catwoman's bondage outfit from Batman Returns. So they allowed her to have a more comic-like grey outfit, so long as they kept the black boots and the black gloves and the black markings on the face, and made her Selena Kyle look more like Michelle Pfeiffer.
It's also strange though, because that's the one big failing of BTAS as a show to me was just their version of Catwoman. Like, I love Catwoman as a character in general, but BTAS's Catwoman I was just like, I never gelled with. It was always because they're so focused on the animal rights part of it. And I was my introduction to Catwoman was Michelle Pfeiffer, so it was very like, even though I was watching that when I was way too young, like it was particularly when we were going through that season minute by minute, we're like, holy moly, I was like 5 or 6 when I was watching this. Like, what the hell? Like, I would never let a child watch this. But, so my version of it is like, oh, that's who Catwoman is internally in my mind, and beyond that, it's just like, well, anti-hero thief. And then in the show, they always like, yeah, I don't know. I always thought their version of it, despite, the great work by Adrienne Barbeau and some of the later episodes, some of the new Batman Adventure stuff, I kind of, when she's a little bit more of a minx and stuff, I kind of enjoyed. But yeah, I always found her to be like the weakest element of, like, for a show that, like, literally nearly every single other villain was done like, this is the best version of that villain you're ever going to get. Their Catwoman was always a bit like, do we need Tiger? Was that a thing? Did you have to spend 22 minutes of all our lives making us watch that? But
yeah. I think the thing with the way Catwoman handled, it's quite interesting that, I mean, I don't know how aware of this you are, but the original script editor was a woman named Sean Catherine Derrick. She was hired initially to help kind of steer the scripts because they were having problems getting scripts done. But she was hired to make a very different show. She had come from making things like The Smurfs. And the network apparently told her that she needed to rein in the darker impulses of the existing team. So she was constantly
it's like, these Tiny Toons people are going way too far. You gotta make them be a little more lighthearted, I think.
Yeah, that's a good joke. I love that. But she was very keen on talking about issues. So I think she was probably one of the leading forces in that characterization for Selena Kyle as an animal rights activist.
Yeah.
And she left fairly early on when Alan Burnett was brought on board. I think she finished up a couple of scripts and, they parted ways. And you can see that change of course in Catwoman's story in the latter half of the series with the episode Catwalk, where Scarface ropes her into a scheme and betrays her. And she ends up getting exposed as a hypocrite and a liar and a thief, and she goes on the run. So that was kind of their way of kind of course correcting it. But I think it's really interesting, the whole backstory around, the politics of the show.
Yeah. Oh, no, totally. There's so many various little, you have to say, because it's all so much of a giant collaborative effort to be like we discovered even things like throughout Mask of the Phantasm, many of the guests have come on, people who had never seen the film before. And the main criticism is always like, man, the Joker just kind of comes out of nowhere in this movie, right? Like we're all going, it's a very linear story. And then all of a sudden, like, oh, by the way, the Joker's here and stuff. 45 minutes in, there he is. And a lot of that might be because of the way that it was put together was, obviously you have that book where Paul Dini talks about it, the Dark Knight, a true Batman story, showing you the writer's room was literally like, we were all working on the show. And then they're like, by the way, we're also writing a movie now, but like, we can't have one person just write the movie. So Paul, you're writing the Joker scenes, and then Alan, you'll do the flashbacks, and then you go and do this, and you go and do that, and then we'll cobble them all together, and there you go. That's a feature film and stuff. So that kind of mentality of like giving people their own little designated departments, and then going like, yeah, we put all that together. Thankfully, for the most part, it all worked out great. But at the same time, we do have people who would dare to say anything against Mask of the Phantasm coming into our show going like, yeah, that's a bit weird. That like, it just feels very disjointed that like a guy who's like the main Batman villain just randomly appears like over halfway through the movie to be like, oh, by the way, it's about him now as well and stuff. But
I mean, I think he was introduced to kind of really ram home the point that Bruce and Andrea were essentially on the same path. They had the same obstacles in their life. They dead parents. In her case, her father was murdered by the Joker, and she wants to get revenge on him. Whereas Batman's always trying. He seems to spend like his whole life just trying to contain the Joker, and they're very different approaches to his crimes. Batman's going to beat him up and knock his teeth out, but then he's going to take him to a mental hospital and hope that he gets better. Whereas Andrea's just straight up going to murder him.
Yeah. I think on paper too, it works really well, just in that it's like a thematic thing. In that, of course, earlier in the movie, you have them going to the world of tomorrow and stuff, and the promises of the future that they might live in. And then when you see the world of tomorrow later on, of course, all the promise has been just rotted away into this decrepit, horrible place. And then who's at the center of that but the Joker? And he was the future for them the whole time. So in that way, it works. But I think maybe they wanted like if you had alluded to him earlier in the movie or something,
Mhm.
like if he had popped up beforehand, maybe it would have gelled more, but it just feels very abrupt. But at the same time, that's kind of the Joker's deal as well. It's just like,
Yeah.
yeah, everything's going great. Oh no, look who showed up out of nowhere. So,
Yeah, because I mean, he did show up in some of the flashbacks, but it was kind of a blink and you'll miss him appearance, and maybe
well,
some
it's
people
one of
didn't pick up
our
on it.
one of our recurring questions again, particularly for people who watched it for the first time, was like, did you catch on who that was? And most people didn't. I was very surprised. Like most people are like, I don't think when I first watched it, I didn't, because I was one of the criticisms I always get lobbied at Bruce Timm's artwork is that he has a very kind of base level of character designs. So a lot of people look very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so Carl Beaumont kind of looks like Bruce Wayne with a different haircut.
And a mustache.
And then, so that's basically Thomas Wayne. Thomas Wayne with a different haircut. And then I remember when I first watched it as a kid, I was convinced Arthur Reeves was going to turn out to be the Joker. Like, I was just like, he just looks like him, right? And then so when the Joker showed up, I was like, what? Oh, and then when they were like, oh no, that other guy was the Joker. It's like, what? Oh god, oh wow, they're throwing a lot at me here. Okay. But so to be fair, I was very young when I saw it, so
your mind was blown with the red pencil moment. It just draws.
Oh, it was. Yeah. We cover that too. It's just like, oh, it's the most ridiculous scene ever. I would not change that for the world, though.
Oh yeah, it's perfect. Absolutely perfect.
It could only possibly be better if that, like, he had like a mustache and then they drew the red pencil over the mustache and a little Cesar Romero reference. So like, oh no, that was covering it up the whole time.
I think maybe it would have been better if he'd drawn the red smile on the wrong person. Like if he drew it on Chucky Soul, went, oh my god, it's the no, not quite. What about this guy?
It's like drawing a blue marker and covering up half of someone's face. No, that's not. Like there's a lady in the background getting at the red, like the ginger pencil. Like, no, we're okay. It's just the Joker. Apparently, we're all right.
Yeah, that's how Bruce Wayne solves all crimes. Alfred, get me my stencil set.
Just going through old photos, it's like, well, you never know. I might discover that somebody's involved. I thought again that's one of the few criticisms of the film we have, though. From seemingly from that, Bruce then deciphers, oh, Andrea's dad was dead, and she's the phantasm the whole time. There's no scene of him going, it's her. Like, he just shows up and he's like, your father's dead, isn't he? It's like, how did you work that out, Bruce? So where'd that come from?
He figures that out because of what the Joker says when he says to him on the phone when he blows up Andrea's apartment. He says something like, listen, Toots, you
no jumping out the window this time.
No jumping out the window this time. That's right. You missed my explosion by a minute. Or whatever it is he says. And he goes, oh god, the Joker got it before I did.
But Joker is very progressive. He's the only person there who's like, well, you could be a woman. You never know. But everyone's like, no, it's gotta be the dead dad, right? But no, usually because of, in most murder mystery things, there would have to be, particularly one that's so emotionally connected as Mask of the Phantasm is, there should be a real reaction from Bruce of like, oh my god, it's the love of my life is the person I've been chasing the whole time. Where they kind of like, well, we have to be economic with the time here because it's only 76 minutes. So you kind of have to have him going, his father's dead, isn't he? There you go. Now I've worked it out. That kind of thing. But
I like to think that he recognized her feelings in her because, he's obviously had the same feelings himself. And he's gone, oh God, I've got to go and help her. Rather than I must punish her.
Well, because he does flat out at you this. Instead of like, shut up, you're going to jail. Like he just says like, just leave, just go. Like I'll just stop what you're doing and go away. I'm not going to pursue you and that kind of thing. But
and that ties in very much with just that version of Batman in general. He's very compassionate. He sees all the shades of grey and kind of acts accordingly. He doesn't just like go, well, you murdered one person, therefore you're going to jail for the rest of your life. He understands that she's killing those people. She's not planning on killing anybody else.
Yeah.
Maybe that's too soft on her.
What was the episode as well about the gangster who he keeps having the flashbacks of his brother getting
never too late.
Yeah, it's never too late. So remember what that episode is so good. It's such a perfect story. Like, and that's not the Batman we usually see, though, where his whole thing is like he's going to this priest and stuff you find out is the brother and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And been like, you have to help this man. Like, this guy's a hardened gangster, but Batman's going out of his way to be like, it's time for you to go and try to connect with your brother again. It's like, Batman used to just be like, the version you get now is that he just batarang people in the face and then go and now talk and stuff. But it's so weird then to see that there actually is a very heartbreaking through line to Kevin Conroy's entire performance throughout all of his iterations, because I've been rewatching the whole show and Batman Beyond at the same time. And to see him go from like, yes, compassionate, Batman actually seems to believe in the concept of rehabilitation and that people can always be helped and stuff. And then, of course, later on, it gets into why Dick Grayson leaves is because he's going too rough on criminals. But you find out that Bruce is actually beyond, when he's doing Batman stuff, he's all business. But then behind closed doors, he's also like, I got that guy a job for Wayne Enterprises and I tried to help his family and stuff like that. But then by the time you get to Batman Beyond, he is so broken and so jaded that, like, when Mr. Freeze reappears, he's just like, no, don't trust him. Never going to trust him. No, you can't ever believe anything Mr. Freeze tells you. God damn it, no. Just like, no, Terry going, I think this Freeze seems okay. Like, no, he's not okay. I'm telling you, you can't trust him. But, it's just to see to go, he does not believe. This is not the same guy who was like, every time Harvey Dent would do something, he'd always be there going, I'm right by you, Harvey. I'm going to get you through this. To like years later, just sitting in the cave by himself and like, screw everybody. No, I've been through too much of this. I don't believe that this Mr. Freeze would get better. I don't believe that the world would get better. One other thing, when he first meets Terry, like he's almost willing to let him die at one point. Like when he's getting attacked, it's just he's such a worn down husk of a man. Which is
and you touched upon something there as well. It's his relationship with Terry is what brings him back. By the time you see him in Justice League Unlimited's epilogue, he's making soup for Terry, and he's like, you got to eat that before you go out. He's basically fulfilling the Alfred role. Yeah.
It's except when throwing in a lot of Justice League too, which is my favorite part of that is periodically, usually in the season finales, they do my favorite thing was they show a little moment of Batman and Superman being pals. And because of course their relationship first opened with like Batman taking out a nightclub full of guys and Superman coming in, taking Batman by the shoulder and Batman freaking flipping him over his back and going like, stay the hell out of this. Trying to take on Superman. And even when I was like 10, when I first saw that, been like, what? Like, how's he going to, why would you just backflip Superman? Like, what the hell are you doing? He's going to kill you. But then to see like, I think it's, there's one point, I think it's the season 2 finale. This is a great little moment where Batman's facing certain death. He's like crashing something into like the
watchtower.
The watchtower in. And it looks like, no, he's definitely a goner. Superman goes up, gets him. And then there's this little moment of the two of them out in the desert together. And like Superman says to him, like, always have to be the hero, don't you? And Batman kind of smiles at him and goes like, right back at you. And it's just a little moment of these two guys, but like, oh, they're friends now. They're like, this is really, really nice. Although it's very strange because I think the last ever line on Justice League Unlimited is like, Superman says something to Batman, and then Batman responds with like, don't you have a tall building to jump over or something? And it's very overtly kind of like, it's almost too friendly. It's almost borderline on flirty. And you're like, oh, that's, I mean, I knew it was going to be Justice League Unlimited, but like, let's see how far these testing the limits you're going to go here.
And it's really interesting to see the impact, of being part of the Justice League, of being that figure of authority and a mentor to so many of those heroes has on the character of Batman. He's so much lighter in Justice League Unlimited in particular. Which kind of, as you were saying earlier, it just makes the state of him in Batman Beyond all that much more sad.
What happened between Justice League and Batman Beyond that broke him so badly? Obviously, some of the events of Return of the Joker, I imagine, quite a bit of that as well. But no, because there's even little things like when the beginning of the whole Cadmus arc, Batman's the first one to get really paranoid about it, but he's more worried about like Cadmus might be right about us, and it's he has that there's a little bit of that darkness is still there when Superman comes into him. He's like, "Oh, Bruce, you know me," and he's just like, "Yeah, that's right, I do." Like he's but he has a moment of like spoken like a true justice lord. Which Superman's kind of taken a little bit aback by, but no, at the end of the end of that season though, Batman has his full trust back in the Justice League, and all that business. They try to, although they have the hilarious moment of, oh, we're all going to hand ourselves in, and then going to Batman, and just cut to him going like, "You want me to what?"
I think Batman gets some of the best moments in that series.
Mm.
One of my favorites is in Maid of Honor, the one with Vandal Savage, where his henchmen are stealing something from a facility, and Batman turns up and beats them up, and he says to them, "Tell me who you're working for, or tell me what your plan is." And the guy says in Kasdian, "You don't speak my language, and even if you did, I wouldn't tell you anything." And then Batman responds in the guy's language, "I can, and you will." I love that.
Yeah, I think that it must be because he's like, well, he is their original baby. They're always going to save the best moments for Batman. I was always a bit saddened that we never got more of him and the Question together.
Yeah, that would have
the
been
guys
good.
on the same vibe. It's like, would they be best friends, Batman and the Question, or would they just inherently distrust each other too much that it could never happen?
I think they'd get on very well.
That's one of the great pains of them getting rid of the current, what do you want to call it, the Snyderverse or whatever that, because I really enjoyed what they did with Huntress, with Mary Elizabeth Winstead, and the idea like, oh, down the line you could have got her with Question, a la the way they did in Justice League Unlimited, and that version of Huntress with a version of the Question. I just really would have liked to have seen what would have happened there. That could have
been cool.
But also nowadays the question would be like, in a post QAnon society, it's like, would you want to have him as a hero in your movie? Would you have to just paint him as a bit of a bad guy at the same time?
Yeah. That's the sad thing, isn't it? Because the Question was always presented as like this extreme figure, but now he's almost mainstream.
Yeah,
particularly in the US, and it's I don't know. It's worrying.
You'd have to jump straight into the Montoya question. I think it's like, well, if it's a faceless LGBTQ person of color, it's a bit more acceptable than white paranoid guy sees conspiracies and everything. So people might be a bit more like, well, I don't like that vibe you're going for there with that, where there's, he's borderline going to come out with Pizzagate at any given second. This is basically the vibe I'm getting. So.
Yeah, it's just start ranting about Hillary Clinton's emails.
Yeah. So I think they'd have to go like, oh, we can do a Montoya question because that's a bit more palatable. But
I think so. Yeah, so that was a really neat kind of through line through the entire DC animated universe there.
Yeah. They covered it all now, so
yeah, that's it. Episode's over. We're going home. No, so kind of getting back to what you touched upon earlier about how, like the Burton or the cinematic movies and the animated series, kind of, no one will see me doing this little hand gesture, but becoming like a snake eating its own tail. It's amazing that they had these character designs and character traits imposed on them, and I think their response with the Penguin was to just go, we just won't use him very much then. And with Catwoman it was like, oh, we'll let Sean Catherine Derrick deal with Catwoman for now, whatever, fine. But then, as you said earlier, when Joel Schumacher is brought on board, he obviously didn't know very much about Batman. He's like the first person to say that. He said that most of the Batman information he got from his nephew, who I think was like 10 years old or something. And I imagine his nephew said, oh, go watch this. It's really good. And I know Joel Schumacher watched a lot of Batman the Animated Series, because in the Batman Animated hardback book by Paul Dini and Chip Zdarsky, there's a bunch of quotes from, important figures from the Batman mythos. Joel Schumacher's in there saying, this show is amazing. I love it. Which is how you ended. Sorry, go on.
No, it's just because we discovered that as going through each season. You can tell on 89, obviously, like the Tim Burton, another person who got sort of like his quote. I think Kevin Smith kind of blew that up, the whole thing of him saying like, "Oh, anyone who knows me knows I would never read a comic book." And then the more research we did, Tim Burton himself kind of said something like that, and then was like, "But no, I did read this, that, and the other and stuff." So he did know Batman, but reading the Sam Hamm's script is very much like, well, there's an element of the Killing Joke in there, and there's elements of strange apparitions, the whole stuff, the Blood Denny O'Neil stuff like that in there. Steve Englehart, he's the whole big thing where like Steve Englehart, though he's claiming that like the Dark Knight is directly lifted from one of his comic books and stuff. It's like he's very jaded as a writer, I believe. But then seeing going to that, and then you go into, of course, Dan Waters comes on for Returns, and you can see like, well, what comics were out then recently? And Catwoman, like her origin story had just been printed. We call it like something about her. The thing we find out her sister is a nun and all that stuff. I can't remember the name's escaping me at the moment. So it feels as if Dan Walsh is like, okay, I better go out and get some Batman stuff, and went literally out to the comic racks, took what was there, and was like, okay, this is what I'm basing my writing on. And then Joel Schumacher's movies very, very much feel like I just watched the cartoon. Yeah. Like they go on documentaries saying like, oh no, it was influenced by 50s and 60s stuff. It was all very Silver Age kind of material, what we were going for. And it's like, no, it's not. It's very much like, and they particularly did that with Batman and Robin. Like, no, it's all, this is a throwback, a loving throwback to the 1950s and 60s comics. It's like, it's the Adam West show. I can tell that it's the Adam West show. Everybody here knows. You can deny it all you want. That's all you were doing, but that is exactly what you were doing.
Yeah.
And it's fair enough. I don't know why you deny it either, but because we have the new from doing that season, I have so much more affection for Batman and Robin, and just like this is some of it is technically incompetent in a lot of ways, which is why it's bad. But there are some things that are like, well, this is all very deliberate as well. You know, they're not. Yeah. It can't be for a reason. They knew what they were doing and stuff, and some of it's genuinely very funny.
Yeah, and I will defend Joel Schumacher to my dying breath because he is an excellent director. Falling Down is one of my favorite movies.
That's terrific. We did a special review, I think, just after he died, and I hadn't seen Falling Down in so many years, and I was like, it's in that same vein of like, well, the question might be questionable as a character now because it'd be linked with MRA kind of people and stuff like that. To then watch Falling Down, going like, oh god, this is probably going to have dated terribly, and find out no, it's actually still a very interesting. Yes. Fascinating character study and stuff. It's like it's a really, really good movie.
Yeah, absolutely. But it's sad that it's still relevant, but it's great.
I was saying you you literally make it today. I guess like some people say with that Joker movie, they kind of did. They kind of did make it today. But
yeah, it's true. But with Joel Schumacher's Batman movies, he was very clearly given the instructions to make a Happy Meal friendly movie.
Yes,
right?
Yes,
and that's exactly what he delivered. He did what he was told to do.
Yeah, that's the odd one where it's just a thing backfiring on him because he talks about how during Forever he had to go out to the toy companies and say like, you want to invest in this film, and they're like, no, Batman's done. Like we've ran the gamut with Batman, and he was like, I promise you, like if you put money into the toys of this movie, this will work out great. Toys, merchandising, all that stuff. This will pay back on you. And they're like, okay, Joel, sure. And then, of course, by the time Batman and Robin comes around, it's like that's all they're concerned about, and they're like, "You have to do this and that and this and that and this and that." But no, because as we went through, her sister's keeper. That was the Catwoman comic I was referring to earlier. But you can see like deliberate through lines in those first two films to the comic book stuff specifically, and there's stuff. There's the Penguin being mayor is a reference to the '60s show, things like that. And then nearly everything in the plot lines of Batman Forever and Batman Robin are things that were like, well, the Riddler being a kind of computer guy is a little bit, the whole virtual reality thing. Yeah, that's from if you're so smart, then why aren't you rich? All the whole stuff with the box is like, well, that's the strange secret of Bruce Wayne. That's there's that episode. All the Two-Face stuff is like, well, we know what the origin of Two-Face is because they did it on the cartoon, so therefore the kids don't even really need to see it and stuff.
Yeah.
And then of course by the time you get to Batman and Robin, it's like Mr. Freeze, what's his origin? It's just Heart of Ice. We're just wholesale adapting that story.
Yeah.
And doing our own thing with it.
The same is true with Poison Ivy because prior to BTAS, Poison Ivy was just a generic thief with a plant gimmick. She wasn't an eco-warrior. BTAS introduced that idea and Joel Schumacher picked it up and ran with it. And I think, I don't know if I'd say BTAS made the whole world think of Poison Ivy as an eco-warrior. I think it was probably BTAS and Batman and Robin that kind of cemented it. But it wasn't until after Batman and Robin came out that they introduced it in the comics.
Yeah. That's one of my proudest moments. Again, all my proudest moments are jokes that I made that nobody else found funny. But at one point in the commentary for Batman and Robin, Joel Schumacher refers to like, oh yeah, she's eco warrior, but she goes too far. She's a bit a bit too much of like a Unabomber kind of thing going on there. And then in the episode, I called her the Uma Bomber, and I was so happy with that. I wanted to do a T-shirt of it and everything, but no, never.
I thought that's where you were going to go as soon as you emphasized Una.
yeah. But those two, like again though, a lot of the 60 show still has so much of its tendrils in there because okay, so a lot of the box stuff is Strange Secret of Bruce Wayne, but the last ever episode of the 60s TV show is about Minerva. And she constructs a device that can read rich people's minds. And she goes in and gets like the combination to the Wayne family vault or whatever. But you're like, oh, that's a little bit like the plot line to the Riddler getting Bruce Wayne's secret identity via this mind reading device that he's marketing to rich people. And then a lot of the stuff with Poison Ivy is very riffed on Marcia, Queen of Diamonds, the Carolyn Jones character. Carolyn Jones, of course, did the original Morticia Addams back in the 60s.
Okay.
There's an episode where she tries to distract people by doing you wouldn't do this now, but she gets her weird aunt to come out and do help her do like a snake charming dance where they present a basket and she comes up kind of and mesmerizes all the men and stuff.
I see.
And that is very much that scene of Poison Ivy stripping off from the pink gorilla outfit. That's from Blonde Venus, which Marlene Dina Dietrich movie from back in the 30s, crossed with a scene from the Batman 60 show. That's where you get that scene from. So that's always the thing. Like, I think we'll be covering the 60s movie probably next season. And it's every time we delve into anything to do with Batman, it's stunning how much of it all still goes back to that 60 TV show of introducing little things.
Yeah.
But they're like, it's even though nowadays, like Robert Pattinson, that mask is like, that looks a lot like Adam West's mask. And one point during the score, during the big climactic fight scene, you get the horns just going, bah, bah. And you're like, that's the Batman song. Yeah.
There's even a bit towards the end where he's not climbing up a building, but he runs down the side of the building. That's an obvious callback to the 60s show.
There you go. Exactly. Yeah. And then Joel Schumacher again doing with the and that would tie in actually to the BTAS verse because Schumacher kind of alluded to it when like having the Batmobile drive up the side of a building.
Yeah.
And then later on in the new Batman Adventures, when they had that episode, it was called Tales or
Legends of the Dark Knight.
Yeah. And it has that one kid who's just like, oh, I love Batman so much. Like, all those tight muscles and that rubber suit. And like, I hear he has a car that drives up walls. And the kid's a long-haired kid fondling a pink boa.
Yeah.
And the other kids are like, oh, get over it, Joel. And it's like, it's obviously a little... How affectionate it is kind of depends on your interpretation. Some people might... The fact that he's fondling a feather boa and kind of prancing around makes it seem as if it's slightly homophobic.
Yeah, it felt to me like a bit of a gay joke. And I don't know, it's a bit mean-spirited, but I get where they're coming from. And I don't think they intended it to be like abusive.
Yeah.
It's just perhaps it wouldn't fly now. It wouldn't fly now.
I don't think you'd go that route with it now. Definitely no. It's always so strange though, because I think those guys are very like tried to distance themselves as much from the Schumacher stuff as they could. Yet in that Batman, the hardback book with like the history of the animated series, you see on Paul Dini's desk as a pinup of Dr. Chase Meridian at one point. That could be just he had a thing for Nicole Kidman, I guess.
Yeah.
And then, as I said, there is an episode where even after the whole aftermath of Batman and Robin does so terribly, it's such a poisonous, pun intended, sort of reputation amongst the public that it's like they have to bump back the release of
Sub-Zero.
Sub-Zero, yeah.
They couldn't have an animated movie be better than their tentpole cinematic movie. I find that so funny.
And so then you had the weird overlap of the new Batman Adventures with the new designs comes out, and then you release a movie that has all the old designs because they made it before, but they had to wait to release it. But then, in the new Batman Adventures, you get an episode that opens with Mr. Freeze freezing a skeleton of a brontosaurus, and he's got like two dames on his shoulder that are like, this is misbehaving from the movie, kind of. It's a little bit Sugar and Spice as well from Batman Forever. And it's so strange then that they conceded to be like, okay, well, I guess that must have been more of a studio thing of like, well, you got to tie this in now to the movies that we got out, because that's what the kids know about Batman. It just seems like I wonder how much of that stuck in their craw when they were going for it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if by that point the studios really cared that much about synergizing with the films, but I think as Batman fans themselves, I think they had opinions about what was going on in the films and the comics, and they made their cartoons almost in a response to them. So a great example of that is the episode Bane, which was made in response to the Nightfall storyline in the comics, which Bruce Timm and Mitch Bryan and Kevin Altieri hated. They thought it was stupid. But then they made their episode Bane in response to that. So it's like the comics were speaking to the cartoon, and the cartoon was saying something in response. And then kind of Joel Schumacher kind of did a similar thing with Bane, except dumbing him down even further. But it's interesting to see that kind of it's like a ping pong effect, you know.
We actually had, for the origin of the Bane's creation scene in Batman and Robin, we actually had Mitch Bryan on for those episodes, and
I forgot about that. Yes, you did, didn't you? So yeah, that must have been cool. I mean, you'll know more about it than me then, because I've never spoken to him.
Oh, you should reach out to him. He's very open to this kind of stuff. We reached out to him for Mask of the Phantasm, but he's just like, oh, I was off the show at that point, so I could come on, but I have nothing to say about this film. I was like, oh wow. But he had a lot to say about Bane.
Yeah.
And it was basically reiterating what you're saying, like, no, they did not like him. And we had to kind of basically sort of go like, well, it might be your fault that he's portrayed as such a like bumbling goon in this movie. And he's like, well, I never thought of it that way, but I'll take it, you know, like I'll take that as a thing. But then even that really then ties into like Bane being the underling of like a female mastermind. It's just what Bane is in The Dark Knight Rises down the line as well. It's just like, it's just all these things. They always just end up tying all in together and stuff.
Yeah, it's just a big melting pot, isn't it?
Yeah. Otherwise, I love their, and even though as it goes on, because everything about Bane in Batman and Robin is so fetishistic, you know, it's kind of fetishistic anyway, but like Schumacher has in like the studded collar and the cod piece and stuff like that. And then of course the new Batman Adventures, when they revamp Bane, he comes back with very much more overtly, you know, his original appearance was very much just like Mexican wrestler.
Yes.
But then when he comes back, it's very like, this is a bit kinky and stuff. There's a sort of S&M undertone to him.
So there's an interesting story about the original like luchador design. So I think they'd already settled on leaning into Bane's sort of Latin American heritage and going, well, we could make him like a wrestler. But I was told that Dan Reba one night caught a what was this wrestler's name? I think it was Blue Demon. I think his name was. So in Mexican culture, they take their wrestlers very seriously. Or at least they did in the 50s and the 60s, and the luchadors never took their masks off in public. And some of the more popular hero wrestlers actually had their own TV shows and movies. Now, one of them was Blue Demon, I think his name is, and he did a movie which was essentially like Phantom of the Opera, but it was a luchador who had become disfigured after winning a wrestling match, celebrating in the crowd and getting trampled. But he was the wrestler called the Bat. And he had a luchador mask with big bat ears on it that he would never take off. But he was living underground, lamenting his misfortune. And he would send his henchmen up to bring down strong luchadors for him to fight and better. And also women that he could get them to fall in love with him, but they never could because he was so hideous. But the thing is, when he took his mask off, eventually you see he's got a Two-Face style disfigurement where like half his face is hanging off and he's got that massive bulging eye. And when Dan Reba saw that, he was like, oh my god, it's Batman and he's Two-Face. We need to use this as inspiration. So he put a tape in his VCR, started recording, and he handed it over to Bruce Timm, and they both agreed, yes, this is amazing. So basically Bane is like a really bulked up version of this Blue Demon guy. He had a very similar mask with the nose cut out and the mouth.
Yeah. It's what's more disappointing though than at the end of the episode of Bane when they take off the mask, he's just like, oh, it's just some guy. Like he's so unimpressive. was like, you
Yeah.
could have told me they could have had a half-faced guy. But I guess they might have been like, we already have a half-faced guy. We can't do another one.
You can't have two of them.
Although maybe Two-Face would like that. It would be part of his whole shtick, you know.
Perfect. Yeah.
That'd be his whole thing. Like, I'm Two-Faced. There can only be one of me. But we can. I guess I'm already two people, but and then I'm three people in the new Batman Adventures when the judge shows up. Like, oh no, it's just getting too confusing now. It's just...
Yeah, that's another funny thing you touched upon there about how convoluted this all gets eventually. When one of the big things about BTAS was that they stripped away all the convoluted stuff from the comics to distill it down to its perfect essence. But then by the time you're in Justice League Unlimited, you're like, look, there's Hugo Strange as Vigilante, and there's Hugo Strange as part of Cadmus. I know who that guy is.
Yeah. I was just thinking probably in the background, like, how are these people joining the Justice League? Like, why are you getting into these people in particular? How many of these ridiculous heroes are there now? But whereas in the BTAS, it really feels like this is like a freak occurrence that there's a guy going around in a cape and stuff. But because I know they had the whole business where they didn't even really want to use the bat signal originally in the animated series, and it's just like and they had a whole thing where surprisingly their inspiration for the relationship with Gordon was kind of like, oh, we liked how sort of aloof and very disconnected he is from Gordon in the movies. So we're but then I always thought it was so strange that like they say that, but the entire basis of my knowledge of Batman's relationship with Gordon is from that cartoon. Seeing it when I was a kid was like, well, he's much more involved with him here. Shouldn't that be the way it is in the movies? And then it wouldn't be until 2005 where someone was like, yeah, that's the way it's supposed to go. But it's very, very convoluted. And then you get we haven't even touched upon all the sort of the obligations of Shirley Walker to work in Danny Elfman's theme, and of course her being very tight with Danny Elfman anyway, because she did the orchestration for 89 when it came out. Because people don't know, the composer will write the music, but then they won't necessarily go and like be the person there waving the baton when it gets recorded. They'll have someone else to do that for conducting them. And so Shirley Walker did that for 89, and then it was one of the other guys from Oingo Boingo did for Batman Returns, as I recall. And of course you get into Mask of the Phantasm, but if you hear synths playing in the background, that's Hans Zimmer is playing those synths and stuff, because she was tight with Hans Zimmer as well. But yes, because obviously in terms of like, begrudgingly having to tie into these films, you're creating your own universe, but the opening of every episode goes da, 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 which immediately in your mind you want to finish with da, 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 da. And so I always kind of felt like that's why when Mask of the Phantasm rolls around, it's such a grandiose and big epic version of Shirley Walker's theme, as if it's them going now like, this is our Batman. Okay, that guy, we're not going to call him Jack Napier in this movie because this is our version of the Joker, and we're opening with our theme tune. This is our universe. And it took them, I guess, from summer of 92's Returns and then Christmas of 93's Mask of the Phantasm, so they did it in quite a quick step to get there. But at the same time, you're still getting things like in November of 92, I think you had what's that episode with Count Vertigo?
Off Balance.
Off Balance. That guy that Batman meets at the start, Twitch, looks an awful lot like Tim Burton.
That very guy. Deliberately so. And he got thrown off of a statue of, it's not the Statue of Liberty, it's some other statue of
Lady Gotham.
Lady Gotham. Thrown right off the top. Now, what is that symbolic of, I wonder?
But then, ironically enough, Joel Schumacher would drive a helicopter into the face of Lady Gotham a mere 3 years later. So it's
talk about salting the earth.
Don't know if Joel saw that and he's like, I see, but we all rub each other, right? He did that, and they're like, get us a pen. We're going to write the pink feather boa asshole kid likes rubber suit. But it was so odd because they have the Twitch looks like Tim Burton. Yeah. But then he sounds like Joe Pesci. Like, it's a very odd combination of things. But then they would do that anyway, because they'd have here's, I think even as a kid, it kind of took me aback to be like, that penguin identifiably looks a bit like Danny DeVito's penguin, but he could not sound any less like him. Yeah. Like, they got Paul Williams in to do, like very effete, very upper crust
Mhm.
guy. Doesn't even sound like Burgess Meredith. Like it's a complete revamp of the character. And so yeah, to have that, so like, oh yeah, we do that. We can have a guy who sounds like Joe Pesci, and then we have a guy who looks like Danny DeVito's Penguin, but he sounds completely different. Just to make sure that we're separating these things off, because we're making our own thing. Everyone should understand.
Yeah. Although I think it's really worth highlighting the fact that because Tim Burton made such a dark movie and it was very successful, it gave the BTAS crew a bit of leeway with the censors, because they could say, well, look, people know what Batman is now. Batman's this dark sort of older teen sort of show, movie, not show. And we want to emulate that as much as possible.
Yeah.
And that's how you ended up with, characters with, with machine guns and pistols, when Spider-Man and X-Men had people with laser guns.
Yeah. It's so strange too, because I've recently started rewatching, let's just say watching properly for the first time, Gargoyles.
Yeah.
Which of course a lot of the crew from BTAS went over to there, Michael B. Reeves being the main one.
Yeah.
And I've noticed episodes where like they very much are following, doing things that BTAS was doing, but other cartoons were doing. So you would have guns and stuff in there. There's an episode where a gun goes off. Like one of the gargoyles is in their Elisa, their friend, like human friend, who's very much like Renee Montoya.
Yeah. She's
just at home in an apartment, and one of the gargoyle comes in, messing around with her gun, and accidentally shoots her. And the whole episode is them all kind of praying by the bedside, and all the aftermath of like someone we're very close to could die from a random gunshot wound and stuff. And you're like, didn't BTAS do this exact same story, but it was Commissioner Gordon and it was Batman and stuff? And it's like, well, let's do all these guys. I mean, and little things like that where you can see they were pushing it where there's drops of blood in that episode, whereas Spider-Man would never have blood in it.
No.
Like there was, they had Michael Morbius with his hand suckers, the plasma. It's still to this day, every time throughout the entire Morbius storm of last year, I was just like, please just let him say the plasma like once throughout and he never did. It was like, oh, it's a complete waste of this thing.
Yeah, shame.
Yeah, but no, those guys knew from doing PTAS. They're like, well, we know that we can push it, and so you go over. And I have to say, for a man in his 30s now, I saw Gargoyles a little bit when I was younger, but it didn't stick with me. It was just so it didn't catch, like, they didn't get every episode, so it just didn't keep up with it, because it's much more of a continuing story and stuff. So
yeah, it used to be on Sundays over here, didn't it? And on what the hell was that Disney show called on ITV? It's like Dig It or something like that.
No, I don't even know if I remember that. No,
used to be like Sunday mornings.
Sadly, I think it was when you were on with us. I never caught on that What's Up Doc was all Warner Brothers cartoons.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, I was like, oh, it's weird that they call it that. And then I was like, oh, they're just presenting a load of cartoons to me. I didn't make the through line of like, no, it's all Warner Brothers cartoons. That's why it's called What's Up Doc. But no, I was like, they have But what meant to say is like, as a man now in my 30s, watching the show kind of properly for the first time, I'm like, this is really, really good. This is like an actual proper sophisticated TV show.
Yeah.
It's from good stock because it's from the PTAS people. Well, not all of them, but quite a few of them. So.
Yeah, loads of them went over. Frank Parr, he directed a lot of the episodes. Brad Rader did storyboards for the show.
That level of animation too is just like, yep, this still looks perfect. Not one note to give.
Yeah, I think. How far along through it are you, or have you watched it all now?
No, I'll do like a couple I'm trying to bring back Saturday morning cartoons into my life. So I have every Saturday morning I'll stick on a couple, and I'm also properly I've seen it before, but I'm going back through like Samurai Jack and stuff like that as well. So as always, every Saturday morning, I was like, I can't wait to get into this. Let me tell you.
Yeah, it was a good time. I can't remember if I told you this story on your podcast, but I've got a very vivid memory of watching Batman one Saturday morning, and a friend came round, rang on the doorbell, and said, "Hey, do you want to come to the cinema with me to watch Power Rangers?" And I went, "Batman's on," and then slammed the door in his face. It was Second Chance, and I'd never seen that one before, so I was like, "Well, I've got to get back to it because I've missed something."
Yeah. Do you? I think you said that you probably literally saw like the first episode as it
Yeah, yeah,
aired, right?
yeah,
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 yeah.
yeah,
So I just remember. So I didn't see. I don't remember it been. I remember it being on CITV. Because I have a very distinct memory of my brother. I have two brothers, and they're both way older than I am. And the second youngest is like 11 years older than me. So like I was a little kid, and I remember him watching. It was like CITV is on around like 5 p.m. I want to say 4:30,
yeah.
5 p.m. In the middle of the week. Him watching the Two-Face two-parter and been like really engrossed in it. And my parents coming in and going like, because he was like 17 or something at the time, and then been like, "What are you doing watching a cartoon? Like, what are you for God's sake?" And him actually saying, "This is much better than anything you're watching." Like, at the minute, I swear to you, this is a really, really good show. But I always remember it been on Irish TV because over in Ireland we get the UK TV, and then we also get the Irish only stations, which are sometimes you get those things way in advance. And its main thing is that it just doesn't censor anything.
Oh, nice.
Because I guess they just don't care. Like
no one's watching this.
I remember like they always had a thing where I think Channel 4 wouldn't show the episode of The Simpsons where they went to New York for ages after 9/11 happened because so much of it revolves around the two towers.
Yeah.
And Irish TV is like, no, go ahead. Just don't care. And they remember them always throwing on like when Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels came out. Them having the Sunday morning movie review show with Dave Fanning, and then they're showing clips of Vinnie Jones like smashing a guy into like like a sunbed, and them just saying, swearing up a storm at 11:30 a.m. And you're just like, nah, nobody cares. Just go ahead and show it.
Yeah, you'd never get that over here.
No. That's Channel 4's butchering of The Simpsons and old episodes of Friends and stuff. It's just like it got to the point then because that used to be where you see it most of the time. And so you'd always be like, it kind of becomes your version in your head. And you're like, no, this is a bastardization. I can't abide this.
You know what? You just reminded me of something about how the UK version of Mask of the Phantasm was edited.
Really?
Even on VHS.
Oh wow! I don't know if I've come across this yet. So I know Batman Forever in VHS was edited down in very bizarre ways, but I didn't know that the Mask of the Phantasm.
So anytime you saw in the flashbacks with Bruce in his ski mask vigilante outfit, they edited out direct punches to the face, and anytime he threw sharp objects like ninja stars or something, it would just cut out. So there's this very obvious weird cut where he's like, on your stomachs, arms spread, you heard me.
Yeah.
And they say, there, look at Mr. Kung Fu, get him. And if you watch the DVD version or the Blu-ray, you see he gets like a ninja star out or something, and then throws it at them. Well, in the VHS release, you hear the guy say, "Oh, get him," and then there's a really sharp cut, and the music suddenly starts coming in, and the guy's like going, "Oh, no idea what's happened to him."
Yeah, I'm surprised because that's actually someone if you need any recommendations for guests. One of the guys who was on that minute was our friend of ours from Ireland, Rob O'Connor. Massive Batman nerd. It knows way more than I do about Batman. And I would highly recommend you guys hook up because he's just a vault of knowledge. But surprisingly, because I remember when we did Batman Forever, he messaged on our Facebook group going, "Thank God somebody's talking about those video edits because no one ever does mention them." That like they would cut out any direct shot of Two-Face's his scarred face. If it lingered on it too much, that was cut down. Edward Nygma, he throws Ed Begley Jr. out a window, but there's a bit where he gets caught and he comes over and he takes the box off his head and stuff like that. That was cut out of the VHS I had back in '95.
Yeah.
And it was weird going through the whole movie because particularly now in that version, because we had Blu-ray, rip or whatever. It was just like, oh yeah, so all this stuff is back in now, and it still feels like it's new to me because my version of Batman Forever is the one that was like I watched every day for like a year because I was 8 when it came out. And stuff. But no, I distinctly remember that the first episode I saw randomly came on Irish TV. It was the Be a Clown episode with the Joker, and another one of those ones where you can tell there's kind of a little bit of a. So I think there was censorship going on with the network because I think originally they had wanted to be like the Joker kidnaps the mayor's son,
Yeah.
And it becomes the Joker. The mayor's son follows the Joker home, basically, and he kind of makes him into like a protege of sorts. And I'm guessing the original story is probably much more designed to like riff on the big clown scare of like the 70s that those guys would have went through, where like, oh, it's clowns on the street corners and stuff like that, which happened again like a couple of years ago. But I distinctly remember watching that episode and being like, there's a Batman TV show. Like, is this going to be on again? Like, did they just make one of them? Like, what the hell is this? And always been very taken aback by, because even then I knew like the Joker, oh, it's Jack Nicholson. He's like a slightly husky 52-year-old man. that's what the Joker's like. And then seeing a much more svelte, active Joker who's like, probably jumping around and getting in the action and stuff. Not to say Jack Nicholson doesn't, like, he's doing a lot of physical stuff, but just not like to the same degree.
Yeah.
It was really mind blowing. And then of course over time, being a kid, around 97 when they re-released Star Wars, knowing like, oh, Mark Hamill, Harrison Ford, all these people, and then watching the show and then seeing in the end credits like Mark Hamill as the Joker, and been like, no,
that's some other Mark Hamill.
That's a different guy, right? That's you could have two different guys with the same name, and it's funny. Yeah. Michael Keaton was Michael Douglas, but no, he had to change his name. But no, and then after a while, been like, the same guy? Like, you're telling me that's the same? That's Luke Skywalker doing that voice. And then to tie it back in though, the original brief of this episode, Mark Hamill, of course, talks about him coming in to audition for the Joker, and them having the picture of like the character design up on the wall. That one has the finger up.
Yeah,
you see them use all the time, and it had like underlined "Do not think Jack," because they knew obviously people are going to be coming in doing Jack Nicholson impersonations, and that is 100% not what we want, because beholden to the show or to the movies, kind of, but also we are still fighting for our own voice. And then so weird to get like, for so long there, the Joker in live action was Jack Nicholson to so many people, but yet the real era defining version of the Joker, who still stands to this day, is Mark Hamill. So of course Jack, though, he so got a bit overshadowed then by Heath Ledger's whole thing. Whereas Mark Hamill held strong throughout all that. All the people going crazy for Ledger, there was always that like, but we all know Mark Hamill's the best Joker, though. Like,
and I think that's true also with Batman actors. People go, oh yeah, Ben Affleck was a good Batman. Robert Pattinson was a surprisingly good Batman. Apparently, people not realizing he's a good actor.
Yeah.
But the majority of Batman fans will say, yeah, they're good, but they're not Batman.
Yeah.
Kevin Conroy is Batman.
That's true. I remember even when Batman Begins coming out, I was just like, I'm liking Christian Bale as Bruce Wayne. But when he's in the suit, could they just get Kevin Conroy to dub the voice? Because I think that would gel a lot more with me than having to be confronted with this new version of it.
Did you ever watch the Birds of Prey TV show?
I caught bits of it. Again, Irish TV, they showed it. And I actually had to watch a bit of it last season because we're covering Batgirl, and obviously, so I had the whole thing with like Aaron Paul's in the first episode and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But of course, there is the oddity of Mark Hamill Joker being there, kinda.
Yeah.
But like dubbing another guy, and it just been it looks so awful.
Yeah, if I remember rightly, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but they didn't really show the Joker directly. He was always out of focus, wasn't he?
Yeah, but you could tell it was dubbed.
Yeah.
Like it had a thing of like, it was just it just looked like a model guy kind of dressed up to look like the Joker. And I think it might also be the fact that it's not Mark Hamill. So it's very like, hey, whoa. But awful show. Awful show. But from the episodes, I didn't watch the whole season. Although again, if you need guests, one of our recurring guests is, of course, another YouTuber, Brit Girl from Australia, and she's obsessed with Barbara Gordon.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah, massive. She has cosplay of the Burnside outfit that she loves to trot out all the time. She's long ginger hair herself as well. You can see why the the affection is there.
Yeah.
But yeah, we brought her on specifically to talk about Birds of Prey because she's a massive fan of that show.
Oh wow. Well,
and so
there had to be one person.
Yeah, so one person out there, she's on there to be able to talk about like, that's they reused the Schumacher suit on the flashbacks for Batgirl, although they weirdly made it look better and stuff. It's one of the few things the show did right, where they're like, hey, paint that yellow and spruce it up a bit. There you go. That's a Batgirl outfit. And you're like, oh, it does look better. Fair play. But yeah. But yeah. That's I don't know. Is there anything else we need to cover for?
Well, I mean, I think we kind of covered everything. And perhaps we can do just the neat summary of basically saying that, yes, the Tim Burton movies did have an influence on the animated series. The animated series would not have existed without them. But at the same time, the animated series was its own thing, and it kind of spawned its own influences on not just the comic books, but the live action movies as well. It's as you said earlier, it's a really fascinating melting pot of ideas and styles that all exist in our like collective idea of what Batman is.
Yeah.
Even if they're quite tonally different.
That one, though, specifically, those two things been linked, goes right back to BTAS's DNA, because, of course, the pitch film they put together, it's called like something like Night of the Dark Knight or something, or that's using all the Axis Chemical music. So this guy's running around in fedoras going dun, 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 dun. But yet you're seeing the birth of a new Batman coming out of the corpse of the other Batman. It's like a chest burster scenario going on here, I guess. Where it's like, we have to use this. We have to use this music for now. But don't you worry, we'll get our own thing going pretty soon.
Yeah, we'll get the person that conducted this music to write us something new and something better.
Well, that's another debate, though. Like, that might be a whole other episode, though. Like, which is the best score?
Yeah.
Because
I do actually have someone coming on in a couple of weeks that wants to talk about Shirley Walker's music, and I will ask him that question. I can give. Let's get your opinion now. Which do you prefer of the Batman musics?
It's if I had to rank them, tragically, I'd have to put Hans Zimmer at the bottom. Well, actually, no, put the whatever we call him, Junkie XL, that guy, whatever. He had stuff for the Batman versus Superman wasn't bad, but it wasn't anything special. Then Hans Zimmer, which was great work. It's just very like, I always remember being frustrated because there's no real leitmotif. It's just that, it's all sounds, and then he always said that like, oh no, there's the beginning of a theme. And as the movies progress, as he progresses as a character, it'll develop into like a Batman thing. And it never did. I guess he just dropped that. Because I think that was supposed to be the beginning of whatever the Batman theme was going to evolve into. And it just, the end of the friggin' third movie is just that sound again. You're like, you never went anywhere with it. What are you doing? Then I'll put Goldenthal, because I love the Goldenthal stuff. I think that's really, really true. Like, very underrated score. And then I have to say, like, the top three, it's a real battle, because I adore the Michael Giacchino stuff for the new film. I think it's absolutely, again, like everything in the Batman, it's very derivative of stuff that came earlier, but it's also great. Like, I can't really complain when it's just like, because even the whole thing of that kind of plodding dread sort of repeating theme of dun 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 dun, that concept is actually in Junkie XL's thing, because his was just the same idea of dun 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 dun, dun, like just building up this approaching storm of a character coming. But Michael Giacchino takes that and then does it better. And there's just so many little elements. I was listening to that soundtrack nonstop last year. Just loved the Riddler, all the stuff with the Riddler, where they're doing the Ave Maria, but that sounded very Shirley Walker-ish at times. What they were doing with it, Catwoman's theme, all that, all really, really incredible. And so there's times Giacchino's would almost pop into the top two for me, but then it is an eternal battle between, like, it's always going to be between Elfman and Shirley Walker, because Elfman's that main theme is just like goosebumps on demand. Like every time you play it, it's going to get a rise out of you. But Shirley Walker she did so much as well, though.
Yeah.
She did so many, like, every time now, all those characters are imbued with a leitmotif. So even if you're reading a comic, like if I'm ever reading The Long Halloween, any scene with Two-Face, I've always got do, 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 do. It just plays in your head every time.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And I was going to say that Shirley Walker's music is a lot more versatile than Danny Elfman's. Danny Elfman's stuff is great. And as you said, Shirley Walker did a lot more. But I think one of the really great things about her music is the way that she would work in Batman's theme into the villain's theme. So particularly with like Two-Face's theme, it would have that, that recorder music. And then you'd get, that's me trying to recreate her music. Poorly, I might add, but it kind of just feeds into it, and it's really just thematically rich. It underscores that all of these villains are a reflection of him, in a way, or they're all a part of him. And I thought that it's just so much more, I don't know, intellectually rich, I suppose.
That's true. That's true.
I broadly agree with your rankings there as well. Actually, I think I would put Shirley Walker at number 1. I think just because of the versatility.
Yeah. She does again too because she got so many hours. Like literally, like Danny Elfman 2 movies.
Yeah.
Shirley Walker like 75 episodes, and then can go into all the Beyond stuff as well, and even Justice League too. But. So that was one of the stories that opened the season for me of with our season on Mask of the Phantasm was that I first saw that film where my brother had got a friend of his to tape it off Sky TV because that was the only way we could get it, and he missed the first couple of minutes. So I'd always come in as the Phantasm was like chasing Chucky Saul through that was where the movie begins for me. And so then I went a whole thing where, like, in the late 90s, early 2000s, I became very much like a bit of a film snob in my teen years, where I was like, I used to like all this stuff years ago, but like I'm into like Scorsese and David Lynch and all this stuff now. And of course, then I always had a little soft spot for Batman because you just can't let that die. And then when the Batman Begins came out, I was just like, "Oh baby, I'm right. I love all this." It all came. The whole House of Cards came tumbling down, but. Eventually, I went out and got on VHS actually off eBay, because it was still that transition period of like it was like 2005, I guess. So VHS was still kind of a thing to me. Most of the world had moved on to DVD, but it was on VHS of Mask of the Phantasm for £3. There we go, what a deal! And it was one of those things of like having denied myself looking at that material for so long. Like literally years, and then putting on like the film starts and you get the big orchestral or the big like choral operatic version of the theme, and I was like, oh yeah, that's like the old theme, yeah. And I think it's just that moment then where mid credits the voices drop out and you just get the big blast of da 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 da. Yeah, I remember being in the living room and like, oh, there it is. Oh, that's the stuff. Like it was such a blast from years ago. I was like, oh, I used to love this so much. Just to hear that music again after so long was like, oh, this is really special stuff you're doing here. So in particular too, like everything in Mask of the Phantasm in particular, like the love theme and stuff she wrote for Bruce and Andrea. Particularly, I think there's a track called like a plea for help or something along those lines. Just absolutely beautiful music. Never those like her main themes get a lot of credit and play, but like some of the little incidental things in Mask of the Phantasm and throughout the whole show in particular are like really phenomenal pieces of music.
I agree.
So I think now you've talked me into talking myself into putting Shirley Walker at number 1 because
yes,
yeah. I think too because so much of the Elfman stuff end up being kind of played out almost. Like it's phenomenal, but then if you've had to play any of like those Lego Batman games where they're just using the '89 score, after a while you're a bit like you're taking the sheen off it a little bit.
Yeah, yeah. And I think with the Batman Returns score, I love it. Don't get me wrong, I love the Batman Returns score, but it is you can hear elements of that score in pretty much everything else Danny Elfman does. Like we watched the Men in Black movies recently, and I was like, oh yeah, it's got that blinky blonky blinky blonky. Oh yeah, that's Danny Elfman, all right.
I remember distinctly going to see him live a couple of years ago. It was one of those things where it was an orchestra. It's that thing he's been doing since, basically, where it was at that point it was just an orchestra that was playing the Danny Elfman music of Tim Burton, and he wasn't conducting. It was like some other orchestra about him, but then he would come on at the end to perform all the Jack Skellington bits for Nightmare Before Christmas. And I think then it evolved into like he now just conducts it as well. It's the whole Danny Elfman show, but he did a great medley of the Batman stuff, but it was very eye opening in that like you get the big opening theme from '89, then you got like the waltz music and Descent into Mystery and stuff, and then when he hits Batman Returns, there's a good 10 minutes of just Catwoman, Penguin, and then when it comes back to playing a bit of the Batman theme at the end, you're like, oh, that's right, Batman was in those movies as well. Because of course that was one of the major criticisms of Tim Burton, is like he wasn't really into Batman, he was into everything else, which is very telling as well, because in the background they'd have all his concept art sketches, and he had one silhouette drawing of Batman, and he had about 45 of every other character. Yeah. So it was the most damning evidence for that particular criticism of Tim Burton right there. But it's a very worthwhile show, though. I think I remember being really gutted in more recent times, because when we went to see that, this is like, my friend who was a massive Oingo Boingo fan. I am as well, but this guy's more like Danny Elfman is Oingo Boingo to me, and then his music stuff, his film stuff is incidental, basically. I remember at the time, like, him saying, do you think he'll play any Oingo Boingo stuff? Do you think he'll play, like, Dead Man's Party or anything like that? I was like, no way. Get the hell out of here. That's all old news to Danny Elfman. He'll never go back to that. And seeing parts of his recent tours, he's bringing out Oingo Boingo, and they're playing Oingo Boingo sets mid the orchestra stuff. I'm like, God damn it, we really should have waited to watch this stuff at a later date, I guess. But now he's evolved into like, he's back on stage, all shirtless, showing off the tats and the wild man hair and stuff. Back then he was still, this was like 2009, so he was still like cropped hair, respectable suit when he came out and stuff. It's like, just let yourself go, Danny, let yourself go, man. But anyway, I think we went off on a bit of a mad tangent there.
It was a great discussion, though. Really great discussion.
But as I say, a great pleasure to be here, Luke. And of course, you're also welcome on to. Yeah, the unfortunate thing with usually on Batman, we always give the guests 3 minutes each, but because Mask of the Phantasm's so short, a lot of people are getting the one and done treatment. And but when we come back, of course, you're more welcome to come on for as many episodes as you want. So.
Yeah, I'd be glad to come back and talk about it. If you do Batman 66, then I can come and talk about that. I used to watch that movie quite a lot when I was a little kid.
I think it was always that thing, Irish TV would have BTAS followed by an episode of that. And so for a long time, I was like, this ain't right. You've shown me the stuff I want, and then you're giving me, what the hell is this? Like, of course, you make your peace with it as you grow older, But of course. And then anyone else who does wants to hear any more of me, you can hear quite a bit of it over 600 odd episodes. Going through.
You've just finished your 5th season, or I suppose by the time this comes out, you might have finished your 5th season.
Well, come up pretty close to the end of Phantasm now, actually. Yeah. The next episode we have to record is the reveal of who the Phantasm is.
Okay.
Right near the end. And then we've got 4 whole seasons covering 89 through to Batman Robin. Loved every season of them. The Schumacher seasons I thought were even better than the Burton ones, because there's so much to talk about in them.
Yeah.
And if you don't fancy any of that, you can also, we do a lot of hiatus stuff as well. So there's episodes of us talking about, some of my favorite episodes we ever did were like us talking about the Prince movies, because Prince, well, they tied into Batman, so we reviewed all of Prince's movies. We do like things on like Joel Schumacher's Phantom of the Opera. We did quite recently. We did the reviews of Mars Attacks, and like the Communion, the Chris Walken alien abduction movie we did an episode on. All these things are they're part of the main feed as well between the seasons. So we're not just all Batman. We're mostly Batman, but we do talk about other things as well from time to time. So if any of that tickles your fancy, then by all means, come and find us on all good podcatchers. And yeah, I think we're even on YouTube and stuff too. I think I know YouTube's kind of your main thing. Look, so yeah. Still trying to understand the YouTube algorithm because it's so baffling to me. Like,
yes,
we have looking at. Because I tend to stay away from like how many listeners we get because I just know I'll become obsessed with it. So I'll never concentrate on anything else. But I do see the YouTube score like views quite a bit, and it's so weird. Like some episodes are like 450 views, and the next one's like 19.
Yeah,
and it's the same people on. You're like, what happened? Like what happened there? Like what's going on? And our most viewed episode, I find it so amusing. Speaking of hiatus projects, we did an episode about the Drew Barrymore movie Poison Ivy because obviously connections to Batman there, and that is currently sitting on 170,000 views on YouTube.
Wow! And
I'm certain it's because the thumbnail is the poster of the movie. And it's people clicking on thinking that we've uploaded Poison Ivy to YouTube.
Because they look at the length of the video and they're like, aha, it's the whole film.
I think it is. It's like, yeah, like 97 minutes. They're like, that's about the length of a movie, right? Yeah. And then going on. I'm surprised we're just not inundated with comments going, oh, for sake, I thought that was a God damn it, you stupid assholes. And I just want to put up like, do listen to the episode though, because we had a lot of fun making it. You never know, you might enjoy it. So
yeah. YouTube algorithm holds me hostage. It's just so weird. Like one week I'll have hundreds of thousands of views, and then the next like 10,000.
Yeah,
and there's no rhyme or reason to it, and I've stopped getting upset by it. I'll just release what I want to release, and if it gels with other people, perfect.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, que sera, sera.
That's the thing. You have to choose your poison. You can either get hung up on it, and then that'll become an obsession potentially of trying to chase why this is happening and stuff like that. Or you can do what I did and just like, no, you just release what you want to release and just keep doing the thing and hope that just things are going okay out there. But then you start going in your mind, is anyone listening? What am I doing? Should I be doing this anymore? And then you drive yourself crazy that way. So,
yeah, it's true. It's not easy making content. You have to be passionate about it because otherwise it will drive you insane.
Yeah. But here we are anyway.
Perfect note to end on. So where can people find you if they don't necessarily want to listen to your show? Perhaps you got socials you'd like to promote?
Not particularly. I'm on Instagram. I do have an art Instagram. I forget the name. It's like Doodle Soup. Might be 1989. I might have tied it into Batman that way, maybe. And I occasionally I'll put up a lot of memes up there on the stories, and occasionally I'll draw some pictures that'll appear in the main feed. And then I'm just on Facebook, but you don't want to. You get the same deal over there. But we do though in terms of Batman and stuff. We are very social media active. So you do have obviously Twitter. Don't really use it because you've been there. Threads, I believe we're on now. And then we are again on Instagram at the Bat Minutes, and our big one is the Bat Minute Listeners Cave on Facebook, where that's very active. Like a lot of people, because we just welcome all Bat chat and Bat related chat. So if you want to come on and talk about like the Ace Ventura cartoon that came out in the mid-90s, we're like, ties in enough. Jim Carrey, fine, go ahead, go and have a whole discussion about that if you want. And so that's where. We talk about the show, and we talk about things related to the show. We talk about all new Batman news on there. And of course, to actually hear me talk about it with my co-host, John, we do also have a Patreon where we have loads of other different content going on. So we do we just loads of random movie reviews. We did a review of the 66 album that came out, like all the novelty songs that were brought out to coincide, like Frank Gorshin's Riddler song and Burgess Meredith's The Escape and things like that. Amazing material. We had a great time talking about it. Did a whole episode discussing all the Batman tie-in songs. And then we had the each issue of The Long Halloween was reviewed. At one point. We did started on Halloween night one year, then reviewed every issue, one a month on the day, the Valentine's Day episode was out on Valentine's Day, etc., up until the next Halloween. But you can listen to it all in one go now because it's all on the Patreon. So that's like, I always say $2 a month because most of our listeners are American, but like whatever the equivalent of that is over here, like £1.80 or whatever it is.
Like that, 175. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, so I'm all over the place. You can probably tell by my conversational style that I'm all over the place.
I think it's much better that way, to be honest, because the conversation seems more natural and less, what's the word I'm looking for that isn't like stunted.
Yeah, stilted. I was going to say
possibly stilted. Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a pleasure being here, Luke. And anytime you want to talk anything else specifically, like so I'm also making my whole way through Batman Beyond as well, where you're taking your show's title from. So
yeah,
happy to come on to talk about anything else that you might want to relate it to that or beyond.
Yeah,
Batman Beyond or beyond.
Yeah, no, I'd be glad to have you back in the future. Yeah, hopefully Mary will be better by that point. And
it'd be nice to
chat with her.
Yeah, it'd be nice to meet her too. Then maybe get both of you on next season if she's up to it. So
I'm sure she would be. So just before we go, I remembered about a day before the podcast was due to be uploaded that I hadn't answered any of the questions, and this is a good opportunity to bring Mary back because she's had some time to get slightly better from her nasal surgery. So Mary, do you want to say anything on this episode?
Hey, hi, it's me, Mary. So I had a septoplasty with turbinate surgery, like something like that. So I had a few weeks where I was just uncomfortable, and unfortunately I was uncomfortable when they recorded this podcast, which I'm really gutted about, but I'm so looking forward to it. And yeah, that's a bit of an explanation on where I've been. I thought, hey, why not answer some questions? And yeah, that's about it. A bit nervous to come back into it.
Yeah, well, it's been a while since you've done any podcasting, isn't it? Because for those that don't know, which is everybody, that we tend to record these in like one go and then wait a week or two before editing it and then upload it a week later, just because of life schedules. But I recorded this episode. It feels like it was like a month ago, but it's probably only 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. If you guys don't know this, Luke and I both have jobs. I know. We don't do YouTube full time.
No, I never would.
Yeah. So we do have 5-day weeks at our jobs, and sometimes it gets a little busy.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah.
So okay, enough
chit chat.
Yep. Let's bring up the questions. So. Questions and comments. So this is on our last episode, which was about the DC pets.
Cute.
So Sharp Design has left a comment saying Ace's whole backstory journey was amazing. So I assume you're talking about Ace the dog, the poor mistreated fighter dog that Bruce Wayne rescued from Crime Alley and took home, and it was really good.
That was one of my favorite things about. To be honest, Ace is such a small character in some people's eyes, but I'm assuming it's going to be a he because they always say boy, but he is such a pivotal character for me because it shows Bruce's obviously hero complex, but it also shows that it doesn't just stop at humans.
Yeah, I mean, he's caring and nurturing.
Yeah, caring and nurturing. But come on, it's a hero complex.
Yes, and that dog was fiercely loyal.
Yes, we love Ace.
For good reason.
Yes.
So next we have, looks like another comment here from Batman369 Abel. I wonder if that's Batman369able. Anyway, fun fact, post-crisis, Streaky was female and a regular cat who got her name due to the fact that she would refuse to use her litter box and would leave piss stains all over Supergirl's apartment.
Excuse me?
Well.
Wow.
I'm going to have to double check that, but I'm sure it's true.
Can we fact check that?
And Two-Face would probably have a massive pet snake that he'd keep in a tank somewhere hidden in his hideout.
Do you want to know something? I think that you're right. When you have a snake, it's very like hot and cold. So I really, yeah, I agree with you.
Cool. Next, Mary, you're going to be pleased with this. So
yeah?
it is a little bit of a long comment, but it's from Screen Wiper.
Hey!
With an update on Blue the chicken, for everyone listening at home that wants to know what's going on with Blue the hen. So Screen Wiper says she still seems to be feeling okay and looks great. She recently showed some more signs of possible reinfection, but she is being closely monitored, and these symptoms have so far not persisted, so we're probably, hopefully, nothing. Excuse me. The vet's in the loop, as are the other chicken owners with more experience. He still has antibiotics and painkillers from her illness, so if something, it can be treated straight away. Partly why she got sick was the pharmacy bungled her meds dispatch twice, and her antibiotics arrived nearly 2 weeks late. He had to get more from the vet directly when a week had passed and they still hadn't arrived. If you can get them directly from the vet and it's something that can't wait, just pay the extra to do it. Sound advice.
Yes.
So today Blue has enjoyed a nice day in the garden, even though it's starting to rain. She's still out hunting and foraging, making a mess of his flower pots. We're close to getting a new pack to be part of after her last one died of various age-related issues. So close. They arrive on Saturday the 19th of August, so long ago by this point. It means so much to me for her to be part of a pack again before everything catches up to her. Blue is a very good girl who taught me a lot and means a lot to me. My big love for her is something she has earned throughout our years together. If I can keep her strong and stable enough for long enough, then before long she should be leading the new pack and helping me train them into good girls like herself. It mentions, I often take photos of her, especially these days, because in her old age of 5+, she actually stays still long enough to get lots of good ones. Happy to send you some. She's so cute. Don't have Instagram, TikTok, or Threads. Not even sure about what the last one is. Yeah, it's fairly new. But I have Facebook and can send emails. So yeah, send emails. My email is on the... it's listed on my YouTube channel under the contact details. So send them over and I'll make sure Mary sees them.
Yes, send them over, please.
And then Captain Alces chimed in saying, glad to hear Blue is still doing well. It was sweet hearing them included her in the pet episode. What a wonderful inclusion to their budding community. Well, that's very nice of you to say, Captain Alces.
I love critters. I absolutely love critters. I mean, I don't love insects, but I love the furry critters.
And feathery ones.
Oh my, can we tell them about last night?
Yeah, so just completely random last night. I was just sitting down working on some YouTube stuff and I hear this strange bird song I'd never heard before, and I looked out the window and there were about a dozen parakeets flying around outside of our window and climbing up the walls on the building. And I'd never seen wild parakeets before. Apparently they're not that rare in this part of the UK. They think that a bunch of parakeets escaped from a private collection decades ago and they've just kind of spread in the wild. But they were getting into an argument with the magpies.
Yeah, rose ring parakeets are what they are.
Yeah, they have a very distinctive song. And there was literally about 12 of them just hanging around and flapping about.
And the quality control officer.
Oh, yeah, Gilgamesh. He was very excited.
Was trying to talk to him, but he was being such a good boy, because I thought he was going to try to get out the window or something, but he was enjoying the moment, and I love that. But seeing those parakeets, just like literally a dozen of them, was just so odd, especially we're not going to say where we live, but for where we live, which is, England, not getting too specific, but there aren't really tropical type of birds here.
We live on planet Earth, okay? There's too much detail, Mary. Get back. Roll it back.
Because parakeets, when you think of a parakeet, you think of, a hotter environment.
Like Brazil or something.
Yeah. But it was a really great moment because I stood there staring out the window for 5-10 minutes.
Yeah.
Just enjoying birds, and
yeah,
it's always lovely.
You tried to give them some seeds as well, but they did not react well. They were just like, "What the hell? Get away from me!
Yeah.
Don't patronize me!"
And I've heard that magpies are quite mean, and I didn't really believe it until yesterday because they were pecking at one of the parakeets, and it was not a good thing to watch. But other than that, they held their own. They held their own.
Yeah.
But no, it was a really lovely thing. So yeah, I thought we should mention that.
And Screen Wiper had one other update from at the time of recording 6 days ago. So he has some more news. He picked up the new hens today. Blue welcomed them. Then she asserted dominance, and then she relaxed. Progress that could have taken a month, and he expected a fortnight to achieve, she did in seconds.
Yes.
So she's always finding new ways to amaze him.
Of
so
course,
that's great.
Blue. Yay, Blue!
Yeah, so hopefully that's the worst of it over now.
Yes.
Okay, so that's enough on the Blue update. So let's move on to RDP 16 rules. It says, thanks for answering my questions. Hashtag totally Schway. I think we need to do something when I say hashtag totally Schway. I don't know. Do you know what? Maybe I'll contact Will Friedle and get him to say hashtag totally Schway.
Does he have a cameo?
I bet he does.
I bet he does.
Yeah. Anyway, it's admittedly kind of a silly concept for heroes to have pets, but it does humanise them. In the world of DC, that's a huge thing. By the way, the latest episode of My Adventures of Superman had a mention of the Super Pet Comet. Yes, I recall. That was the one with the League of Loises, wasn't it? Personally, I would like to see Two-Face own a black and white pot-bellied pig named Duo. That's a good idea.
Oh, I like that. I love pigs. I absolutely adore pigs. They're very sweet creatures. Not as dirty as you might think, though.
As far as what I would like to see on this podcast, here are a few suggestions. Character shipping. Your favourites from the series, and does it help or hurt the fandom?
I see Luke's face.
Yeah, we have different opinions.
I think we could... You know what? We're going to do that. We're going to ship some of the heroes. And maybe some of the villains. No, we're going to do it. We have to. All right.
Fine. That'll be a Mary-centric episode. I'll just sit here and listen and go, okay,
Yeah.
Anyway, action figures that you wish had dedicated episodes. Don't quite understand that one. Are you talking about including action figures that were never in the shows that you wish appeared? Like Lightning Strike Batman or whatever?
Do you know what would be really cool? Is if they had a TV show, but it was the main characters of it were the McDonald's toys that were
the Happy Meals.
Yeah, the Batman ones. That would be cool. Warner Brothers, hit me up.
So 2 other suggestions here. Talk about the actual League of Super Pets series. I think that was the Crypto the Super Dog cartoon. Is that on Max?
I don't think so.
No. Well,
I'll double check, but it might be.
I'll see if I can find it somehow. A discussion about the Gotham City Sirens. Yeah, and I hope that helps. 2 new questions, and thanks for the great podcast. You're welcome. So question 1. Have you seen the movie League of Super Pets? If so, what are your thoughts?
I liked it.
Yeah, we watched it.
It was good. That was a pandemic movie, wasn't it, for us?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love Dwayne Johnson. I don't mind Kevin Hart, but I think those two, the comedy that those two make and the different personalities just really work with each other, and I think it was really good on that movie, on an animated movie in particular. It was so good.
They're like peanut butter and jam put together. They're very different, but they work.
Peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah, that's what you would say, but it's jam.
But no, it really worked. And to be honest, I wasn't really like, because this is before I had seen the Jumanji films. I think I didn't know how that would go, but I really liked it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it too.
Yeah, come on, I would watch it again.
Good, easy watching, you know.
I think
nothing too deep.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we're so engrossed in watching, deep storylines that have to do with tragedy and stuff like that. Yes, I'm looking at you, Luke.
Yeah.
And sometimes just to have something quite wholesome that also has a good message behind it it's nice, especially for someone like me, because Luke, what do I watch before I go to sleep?
You tend to put on like cops and like murder documentaries, and then you complain of having bad dreams. I'm like, watch something else while you're asleep.
What was I had a nightmare about a plane crash.
Yeah, and you'd been watching a video about people dying in plane crashes.
Yeah, I love watching, there's a YouTube channel called Infographics, I think is what it's called. And I watch that sometimes, but I watch the playlist. So I guess the playlist had turned to something about the Malaysian Airlines flight, and my dream just went to plane crashes. What joy.
So the next and final question was, do you know that there's a Pet Avengers comic book? It's very cute and features Frog Thor. Fun stuff. This is a DC podcast. How dare you bring up Marvel's Pet Avengers? No, I'm joking.
Don't care.
I like Marvel stuff as well. I think I mentioned this before, grew up with Spider-Man and X-Men and Avengers. And, until about 15 years ago, I was buying up all the Marvel comics as well. So, I didn't know that there was a Pet Avengers comic book with Frog Thor, but I am very familiar with Frog Thor from, I think it was Walter Simonson.
Does sound interesting.
Yeah, so Loki puts a curse on him and turns him into a frog.
But guess what? Don't care. No, I'm not the biggest Marvel fan. I mean, I've seen all of the Marvel movies and I went to the cinema and everything. I got into the hype, but I just, in terms of like other ones other than X-Men and I think just X-Men, I'm not the biggest Marvel fan.
I'll mention my favourite Marvel comic series probably ever. Well, actually, there are a bunch that I really like. I loved Garth Ennis's Punisher Max. It was so bleak and horrible. But one that I really love is a comedy series. It's called Ecstatics. In the early 2000s, they kind of rebooted X-Force as like a reality TV fame-hungry superhero series. It was very much a satire. It got rebranded as Ecstatics, and it's recently had 2 miniseries called The Excellent. I love those. I think they're amazing. I'm sad that nobody else seems to think the same thing. But if they release any more of it, then I will buy it gladly. By Peter Milligan and Mike Allred. I think it's great. Some of the best X-Men comics out there. Mm. Mary nods politely, going, don't care. I was with you when you said reality TV, and then I just kind of drifted off.
Yeah. I'm not the... like I said, I'm not the biggest comic book reader. I like the TV show, The X-Men. Previously on X-Men.
Previously on X-Men, that's how you have to say it.
I love that show for, what it stood for, and what it still stands for today, because I think a lot of the issues that we had at the time of the making of that, we still have, unfortunately. And just like with Batman, they took on issues that maybe some people thought kids shouldn't know about, but they did it in a way that kind of went over their head. But then as we became adults, we were like, hey, it's okay to be gay. Guess what? Females deserve the same respect as males.
What the hell?
And it's okay to feel sad. Guess what? They did that on purpose.
Yeah. Yeah, very deliberately so.
I mean, mind you, my parents probably liked that just as much as I did. And they didn't care that I watched that, but that's one of the reasons I like X-Men. We kind of went out on this question.
Yeah, we did. We were supposed to be talking about Frog Thor. So let's go on to the next comment. So Big Homie 4127.
Yo, homie.
I believe this is a suggestion for a podcast topic, and that was curious to hear your guys' opinion on the Arkham games. Now, full disclosure, I work in the games industry, so I try to avoid talking about games because I don't want to be like massively critical and offend people that I might end up working with at some point. But I think it's okay for me to say that I really like the Arkham games. I've platinumed all of the Rocksteady ones on PS3 and PS4, and if they ever do a PS5 re-release, it's going to be done again. I think 100% of them on Xbox 360 as well.
You did.
Arkham... God, I forgot its name. Arkham Origins, it was okay. It's not as bad as people initially said it was.
I think that's a blanket thing that people say as well. That it was alright.
Yeah. But I've played them to death. If you look on my my PlayStation profile, you can see I think it's my most played game.
I like the games. They were really nice. That's my opinion. I haven't played. What's the one that I haven't played?
Arkham Knight.
Yeah, I haven't played Arkham Knight, but I really liked Asylum and City. Yeah, that's really it. I like to play video games, but I think Luke and I have a different taste in video games.
Yeah.
Because I like the Sims, the Stardew Valley, the Minecraft, the
Tomb Raider games, you like them?
Yeah, I like Tomb Raider, Harvest Moon, stuff like that. We also like games we can play together, but I'm not the biggest fan of the fighting bit. I get really annoyed when I have to do that. I mean, it's good. It's one of the best ones I have played, but I'm not good. I don't have great hand-eye coordination. So when I'm trying to touch a button or whatever, I'm like thinking about it too much, whereas a lot of other people can just go click, 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 click. I'm like, no, what?
I will say, though, that I am very proud that I 100%ed Arkham Knight, including the DLC. And there's one challenge map on there where you're facing off against an endless wave of enemies and you have to get something like 1.2 million points before Killer Croc appears, and then you have to defeat him to get the trophy. I did that. I did that on my work lunch break one time, and when I did it, I kind of threw the controller up in the air and went... It made people look at me weirdly. I was like, I just did something really hard in a game. Leave me alone.
Yeah. That's something we can talk about at some point, is the different Batman video games over the years.
Well, that's the suggestion, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, so next comment. Not many left now. So Captain Al says, finally got to listen to this. I was surprised by the long road down memory lane, but I certainly appreciate it. My cat Oliver was my best friend too, and I sometimes think of him and end up grieving all over.
Oh,
yeah.
We love Oliver.
Yeah, that's the sad thing about pets, isn't it? They don't live very long. But comparatively,
they make just as much of an impact as somebody who lives 80 years.
Yeah, I'd probably say so, yeah. On a lighter note, or lighter tone, excuse me, you mentioned me again and pronounced my username correctly. I didn't know that it was that difficult to pronounce.
What is it?
Captain Alsa's. That's how I say it. Maybe I'm getting it wrong. Anyway, he says, outrageous. It's a running joke among all my friends that nobody can. But that's what I get for putting Latin in my handle.
Oh, I see. If it were me, because I'm from Oklahoma. As soon as I said that, I realized I didn't even mean to go Oklahoman on that. But I don't know Latin, so I'm sorry, Cap. That's what your name is now, Cap. Love you,
Cap now.
Cap now. No, I'm. Bless you. I love Oliver.
Yeah. So, last question, and it's not a positive note, unfortunately. Zehanaut 10, I believe is how you pronounce the name. I've probably got it wrong, and I apologise if I have. So Harley treated Bud and Lou well, but the Joker didn't. And in the Arkham games, the Penguin had them killed, stuffed, and put on display in his museum. That's true, he did.
Yeah.
I don't know what to add to that. That is a statement of fact, and I can't dispute it.
Yeah. I loved Bud and Lou, and I know a lot of people love the Joker as a character, and they think he's like badass and everything. But I mean, look at this comment and just think about this. Every time you say, "Oh, I love the Joker in this," he did not care very much for animals, and you know what that's a sign of? Being a psychopath. He's a psychopath.
Breaking news: the Joker is a psychopath.
Yeah. And a mean one too. No, in all honesty, I kind of try to forget that. This stuffing thing.
Okay, on that positive note, we're going to call it quits there. Any final notes, Mary?
No, but I would like to know what our next episode's about.
Okay, well, if everything lines up correctly, we're going to have a guest join us, and we'll be talking about Shirley Walker and her contribution to the DC animated universe. Although, let's be frank, it's probably going to be an hour-long conversation talking about her Batman music.
Can I just ask one question about this?
Please do.
Did you do our Danny Elfman impression with the guest?
Well, we haven't recorded that session yet, but with this episode, yes, I did do it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Good.
And I will do it again.
Good. Blinky, blocky, blinky, Danny Elfman.
Yeah.
Desperate housewife. Pots and pans. It's so embarrassing.
I'm going to leave that in.
Yeah. All right. So that is it, guys. Again, please ask some questions. Do some comments. Add TikTok.
Oh, we did have a follower on TikTok. It was Captain Alsa's. Yeah.
Cap! Yeah. Love you. We'll follow you back.
Yeah, it's very nice of him to leave comments.
I think we have like 2 followers.
Yeah, I know.
One of them's me.
Yeah, well, actually, don't really post very much on there, and we need to kind of get in the habit of posting on there and Threads, and I'm probably not going to bother with Facebook, but maybe, I don't know.
If you want to add me on TikTok, you're more than welcome to do that. I think it's Mary Susan Mears. It's got a lot of Halloween stuff on there, and I don't post very often, but if you ever want to ask me questions or whatnot, you could do it through the Totally Schway one, which get looks at more often.
All right, Mary, so where are our socials if people want to reach us outside of, leaving YouTube comments?
So on Instagram, it's Totally Schway Podcast.
And the same on Threads.
And on TikTok, it is... I'm just going to check this right now.
I've got it open.
Oh, okay, what is it?
Surprise, surprise.
Totally Schway Podcast?
No.
Totally Schway Pod?
No. It's Luke. No, it's not. It's
Dickhead.
Yeah, it's Totally Schway Podcast. Yeah, trying to make it easy for people to find us.
Yeah, Luke doesn't have TikTok.
It makes me feel old, I'm sorry.
Yeah, but hey, I'm going to stay young in this relationship. It's fine. I will forever be... I'm not going to tell you how old I am. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening. I am going to go have sugar-free root beer.
Cool. Until next time, go Schway.